My name is Thomas Martin. I'm here with an organization called Seaspring, and I think we've got some good speakers for you all today. Started off, we will have Lynn Rusher and Kaylin Francis talking about how to look for land in all the hard places as it relates to Winston-Salem and their reduced area for developable land. Lynn has worked with Winston-Salem, Forsyth County, and Planning Development Services Department for about 30 years, and currently leads the GIS mapping section, providing mapping and GIS analysis functions for the City of Winston-Salem departments. She received her master's in geography from the University of Georgia and her bachelor's in geography from the University of South Florida. Kaylin comes to us as well as part of the county, where she graduated from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill with a double major in psychology and sociology from Clemson University, where she earned her master's in city and regional planning degree. She has been with the County Planning and Development Services Department's GIS mapping team for about 4 years, first as a GIS planner and now as a GIS project planner. So please join me in welcoming these two ladies up to the stand.
Good morning, everybody. Okay. Today we're going to talk about looking for land in all the horrible, terrible, awful, good, rotten, forgotten, and hard places. Forsyth County has a problem. It's running out of developable land. We're going to talk to you today about efforts that the City of Winston-Salem is engaged in to better use the land resources in the county. And using GIS, we've analyzed ways to find usable land. Those greenfield new land opportunities, infill development, revitalization and stabilization sites, and areas for outreach to the public. Forsyth County is located in the Piedmont of North Carolina. It ranks 4th in population, 5th in density, however, it's 60th in size. Winston-Salem is in the heart of the county. It shares the county with 8 major municipalities. Winston and Salem incorporated in 1913 and grew, and it has grown over time in a relatively steady fashion until after World War II, where on the advent of the automobile vastly and more rapidly increased the boundaries, increasing our sprawl. As you can see here, the growth was relatively steady throughout time. However, the density dropped nearly 70% in the last century. And all this, by 2030, it's projected that we will have 120,000 extra people and need another 66,000 jobs in the county. And as planners, we got to figure out where these people are going to live and work. But we have a plan. It's called the Growth Management Plan. And the plan kind of gives a blueprint for where we want development to be. The downtowns are where you want to concentrate your commercial type or government uses. The urban neighborhoods in our community were built largely before 1940, and they tend to be very walkable areas because cars weren't really available during that time. The big yellow areas are suburban neighborhoods that came in the 50s and to the present time. And the green areas are our future growth areas as services are extended. The dark green areas are rural areas composing about 1/3 of the county, and those are the areas we want to preserve in their natural state. Our topography largely defines what we can use as our growing area, and we kind of call that our serviceable area. And so everything inside the blue line is easily drained through gravity sewer. Anything outside increases your efficiency and effectiveness in providing those services to others. Currently, our land use pattern, our land lot pattern looks like this. You can see the density in some areas and the not too dense areas in others. About 40% of this land is currently in residential use. Another 16% is in commercial and industrial use. Another 12% in land uses like parks, schools, or nonprofits, which yields us about 25% of our parcels left for development. But since we're looking for land here, we sort of kind of looked at using some of the larger, not very used residential lots. And we could find about 13% more land there, which will give us about 38% of land available for development going forward. And one of the ways we have tried to follow trends or seek trends in our construction activity has been through this product we have developed called a development dashboard. In here we have geocoded construction permits from the inspections department. We've coded those permits by land use type and amount of investment. We've generated reports, and this report is produced quarterly and is provided to the public and in interest groups such as the home builders, realtors, elected officials, downtown advocates, and the Chamber of Commerce. These permits over the last 4 years show that development is mostly occurring on our western side of the community. That tends to be the big money side of the county. And, but it also shows lack of investment or disinvestment in the eastern part and southern parts of our county or in the city. And this is what the development dashboard looks like. It's created quarterly and it's available online, or you can ask to have it sent to you via email. One of the ways that the city is trying to better use some of their resources, the existing resources, is through the Transforming Urban Residential Neighborhoods project. Now, this project was created in response to citizens' concerns about the declining urban residential areas. And most of those areas are those growth management areas you saw. They were orange previously, that were built prior to World War II. The project provides financial assistance to rehab single-family owner or invested occupied properties. The goals of the project are to conserve existing housing stock, to ensure the public health and safety, and to leverage private investment in the area. It's also, and most importantly, it's also to assist in the revitalization in deteriorating neighborhoods. The study started in 2013 with mapping 5 years worth of building violations, housing violations. As you can see, the violations are most heavily concentrated on the eastern side of the community. There were so many dots we had to make a heat map so we could ascertain where the worst problems were. And from this data, 24 neighborhoods were targeted for further study. Each of those neighborhoods had its blight factor calculated. Now, the blight factor is the total number of violations divided by the total number of housing units, which basically gives you a percentage of blight. And that ranged from about 6.5% to just about 31%. Those neighborhoods were then broken into 2 tiers for consideration in funding. A bond referendum passed in 2014, which provided money, and the top 5 neighborhoods were targeted for improvement. And those improvement efforts go on today. The efforts include things as helping with facades, fixing stairs. They even extend into making driveways, sidewalks, even fixing inside stuff like countertops or sinks. In addition to looking for existing resources, the city is also looking for those forgotten, unused lands, and we're looking into unopened rights-of-way. Now, easy stuff happens first. So the easily developable properties in the city have already been developed. The undeveloped properties do exist on streets that were planned but never built. Now, a major factor in the construction of streets is the cost that the developer has to bear. The developer has to do a cost-benefit analysis. Is there enough land available that would make it feasible for them to construct the street? If the street is too long for the limited amount of land, they're not going to do it. So we do know there's hidden properties, and the city is thinking now if they can help the developers, maybe we can get these things developed. Now, the benefits to this would be to increase infill development, reduce our sprawl problem, and to focus our development where municipal services and infrastructure are already in place. Now, the process we used was to inventory the rights-of-way. We needed to assess the availability and sustainability for their development, and we were looking for good infill opportunities. We're gonna. This is an ongoing project, and the results will be presented to the council. So this area in purple is sort of what folks had when they assigned this project to us of what we were looking for. There's sort of an abandoned subdivision here, and it has two unopened streets on it. The streets that have the orange lines, those are built streets. Those are the center line layer for those. And so, in looking for the unopened streets, we ran smack into a problem of if your street layer shows where the streets are and the parcels show where the parcels are, how do you find streets that don't exist? How do you map something that doesn't exist? So that was our first problem. So this is the solution we came up with, was to buffer the center lines that we do have based on the street right-of-way width. And we combine that with a parcel layer. And then we combine the parcel layer with the county polygons and basically a clip. And what that left us was the holes. And we hoped those holes would be the unopened right-of-way, and they did pretty good. Now, each of those segments was mapped, and we noted the length and the width of each one. Anything less than 30 feet was classified as an alley, and it was kicked out of the analysis. Anything over 30 feet had additional data collected, such as segment length, the number of adjoining undeveloped properties and their acreage, the potential number of lots developable under current zoning, the zoning and minimum lot size, its suitability for development, whether it had environmental factors such as steep slopes or flood areas, and also we had to consider the bang for the buck. Just like the developer, we can't extend a street a long way for one little lot, so we had to think about that. And only parts of the segments were considered in the analysis, just enough to reach the properties. If the street continued on past the properties, those too were also kicked out. This is each of the segments that were considered suitable were then mapped, and sort of a little inventory map. And this is probably one of the better ones that we found. This is the one that the director thought was all over the county. It's not. The lots here are typical of this neighborhood. The street length is short. This is what we're looking for. This is good. This one, not so good, but still pretty good. The lots are varying size. They're a little large for the neighborhood. Actually, they're quite large considering the demand of the neighborhood. And the northern part of the section has steep slopes and stream concerns. But there's still a lot of acreage there. But this is what we typically found. Lots of varying size, weird shapes, and having a lot of environmental impacts. But this was by far the weirdest situation. This whole subdivision was abandoned sometime in the 50s. So there's 88 lots sitting out there just waiting for somebody to take care of them. Now, the results of the study showed that the unopened right-of-ways are all over the city. Most of them are found in GMA2, but most of those were alleys. In the suburban areas were found the most suitable unopened right-of-ways. Currently, those right-of-ways tend to be vegetated, although some have encroachments in them, and some actually have actual things built on them. So if this ever goes forward, I don't know what they're going to do with those. The study also found that if all the suitable land within the scope of this study were developed to its highest potential, we could achieve 3,700 additional lots. And the goal of this is to help accommodate our population growth, increase our tax base, all without adding to our sprawl problem. The study will go on to compare the target properties with adjoining properties to assess their value. Those with the highest value will be prioritized, And other things we need to do is consider actually building the entire length of the street, those segments we kicked out before, for issues such as connectivity and walkability. And as far as legal things, we also need to consider closing right-of-ways that should never be in use and return them to the tax rolls and remove question of the city's liability. Another way the city has been looking for land is actually another reuse of property, and it's revitalizing urban commercial areas. The City Council recognized that there were problems in declining urban commercial areas. This is also in that orange growth management area too. These urban areas are the front door to neighborhoods, and if they're bad, it's a negative economic impact on the health of those neighborhoods. The underutilized and unutilized and blighted properties are in need of assistance to change this disinvestment trend. It's also thought that if we revitalize these areas, we can also help reduce our sprawl problem and bring those neighborhoods back to life. Study started in 2005, where we've mapped and analyzed commercial nodes throughout that growth management area too. Staff then went and surveyed the areas and determined the 12 areas most need of revitalization. Now, what did all those 12 areas have in common, and what makes them undesirable areas for new investment? Why have they been abandoned? Staff found that aging infrastructure and lack of infrastructure and amenities such as sidewalks, streetlights, bus benches, and garbage cans, also lack of landscaping, sea of pavement, lack of street yards or interior plantings, unscreened dumpsters or utilities, poor parking lot conditions, dilapidated or vacant structures, unsightly fencing and security features, excessive or dangerous curb cuts. These are really dangerous for pedestrians and also for cars because they don't know who's coming out where, and just outdated, worn-out facades. In 2006, the city held a competition for RUCA funding, and 3 areas were chosen. Now, each of those areas was administrated by either a community development corporation or by a neighborhood representative. The merchants themselves had both grants and loans available to them. They also had to get some skin in the game. The planning department has a sign-off to ensure that all the designs comply with the RUCA report, and money is actually handled by the Economic Development Department. Each of the areas was mapped and all their improvements was noted. And then a plan was made for each of them, showing things such as landscaping, benching, fixing of facades. And we've actually had some very nice successes across town. These are just some before and after shots, things such as screening unsightly things, narrowing the curb cuts, adding landscaping, fixing of facades, windows, and adding parking. In the next round of funding, 10 areas have been funded, and then the city is also committing up to $4.5 million at this time. Of the original 12 areas, now there's 18, and any of those in the Tier 1 or Tier 2 can apply for money. And now Kaylin will be giving us another program here.
So I'm going to talk about another project our work group has produced, and this project was targeted at developers to be part of our developers toolkit. So it's a way for city county planning to provide resources for developers in Forsyth County and attempt to produce an atlas of developable land for different land uses to help guide development and match our comprehensive plan Legacy 2030's development vision. So the Development Opportunities Project was split into 3 phases. Phase 1 was completed during the 2014-2015 fiscal year and focused on the low-hanging fruit, so vacant properties already zoned for the proposed uses, which include industrial, commercial, multifamily, and mixed use. Phase 2 was completed last year and focused on vacant properties that were perfect other than they needed to go through the rezoning process. Here's an example from Phase 1. As you can see, we've got output with a lot of disclaimer. And so what we were doing with this was, again, just picking the low-hanging fruit. It shows all of the land identified in that phase. And it used land and building values to determine vacant land, and then looked at our zoning data to find the land that was most easily acquired for commercial, multifamily, and industrial uses. So this study, it was purely GIS based, so it did not take into account combining parcels or any kind of land features like topography. The final product was 3 booklets that showed the sites in more detail, divided by commercial, industrial, and multifamily. Phase 2 was also organized that way. This was looking at already vacant land that just needed to go through a rezoning process. Lots were not combined, and features of the land, such as topography, were not studied. So with the first 2 phases, planning staff and our land use planners really didn't have much input. These were purely GIS-based studies. So how is Phase 3 different? Well, in Phase 3, we're looking for infill and redevelopment areas, so lands that are not vacant or are not picked up in the first 2 phases. So we found out right away that we would probably need to partner with our land use group so we can combine GIS analysis with their land use planning. So using our GIS-produced area plan land use maps, which show the proposed land use for all of the parcels in our county, we got the planners that were in charge of those area plans to help us identify sites in each plan based on the study parameters. So we were only looking at GMAs 1 through 3 because we're trying to infill into the most urbanized parts of the city and county. We're trying to choose land for this phase as a community development tool. So we needed people that knew where to put these, or where to identify these sites. So again, here's a map of our growth management areas, and the study is focusing on the red, which is our downtown area, the orange, our urban neighborhoods, and the yellow, our suburban neighborhoods. So here's an example from Phase 2. As you can see, a vacant parcel was identified. It was zoned RS9, which is residential zoning, but it's surrounded by commercial use. So it was picked up in Phase 2 as a good site to just be rezoned. So Phase 3, when we handed this over to the land use planner, they not only identified the first site as a good commercial infill site, but also a site near it where you combine parcels for a commercial redevelopment site that's currently mostly residential but surrounded by industrial and commercial uses. So this is the result of that study. This is all the commercial land we've been able to identify. Industrial, residential, and in this phase we're looking at all types of residential, not just multifamily, and mixed use. So this is an example of what a page out of this new atlas is going to look like. It's going to have the site along with some pertinent GIS information that we got from our data. So it's going to have parcel numbers, the physical location, the acreage of the site, whether the site's in single or multiple ownership, the GMA of the site, any environmental issues, so slope, floodplain, any kind of contamination if it's a brownfield site, the current use, the current zoning, the proposed use, which area plan it's in, and any notes on the site that might be of interest to developers. So using GIS, this is one of our main projects that our department and specifically our GIS team is using to reach out to developers and also follow our comprehensive plan Legacy 2030's development vision and to kind of keep development centralized while also identifying and highlighting different development options. So the takeaways from the projects that we have described, so Forsyth County is running out of developable land. Using GIS, we assessed a number of ways to find usable land. With new land, the first 2 phases of the Development Opportunities project, infill development through the unopened right-of-way project and also the Phase 3 of the Development Opportunities Project, revitalization through the Turn and RUCA projects, and stabilization through the Turn project. We've also attempted outreach with internet mailings, community meetings, and making community connections. So by increasing urban density rather than suburban expansion, it makes better use of our existing resources. It's more economical, sustainable, and reinvigorates the existing areas of the community. So the overall thesis of what we've tried to convey today is GIS is a powerful tool in guiding development in our communities and communities across the world. Thank you.
All right, Lindsay, thank you.